Welcome to Hello PostgreSQL here at TechPub. In this production, we're going to have some fun with Postgres, popular open source database engine loved by DBAs as well as developers. In fact, that is our goal with this production, to introduce you to the power of Postgres from the perspective of both a DBA and a developer. And as you might have guessed, I am the developer. I have a good amount of experience working with Postgres every day. It's the system that's been powering TechPub for the last few years. For a DBA's perspective, I'm joined by Rob Sullivan, SQL Server DBA, whom you might remember from our full throttle database tuning production. So let's start here. It's likely you have a favorite database system. If you're a Microsoft developer, that would probably be SQL Server. If you're a PHP, Ruby, or Python developer, odds are that you use MySQL. These systems are fine, and in fact, with a little work, they do what you ask of them. But we invite you to set aside what you're used to, and in this production, see the amazing features of Postgres. We think you'll be surprised at how powerful and flexible this system is. So Postgres is not your typical relational database system. In fact, it describes itself as an object relational management system, which, frankly, I thought was a bit weird when I first read it. However, as Rob and I dug into the various features of Postgres, I began to see why this description is appropriate. Concepts such as logical partitioning, table inheritance, windowing functions, these are all unique to Postgres and offer interesting solutions to data storage. What many developers, as well as DBAs, find compelling is the commitment Postgres has when it comes to protecting your data. Other systems like MySQL, which you see here, and earlier versions of SQL Server were a little bit looser when it came to freely changing your data in an effort to accommodate query mistakes. MySQL is notorious for its inability to understand null constraints on a few different data types, which is what you see here. I'm trying to insert null into text 1, a column that I've explicitly said cannot take nulls. MySQL is trying to help me out by inserting an empty string. Now, if you ask the MySQL team, why is this happening? They would say, well, we're abiding by standards. Postgres won't do such a thing. It will not put an empty string in place of a null value into a column that can't take null values. It will raise an error if the data doesn't fit the constraints and the column definitions you've defined. We'll devote an entire episode to that in this production. So Postgres used to be known for its below-par performance, but with the release of version 8, and the current version that we're going to be seeing is 9.1, the Postgres team has focused on speed and reliability. There are also many enterprise features built into Postgres that you would have to pay top dollar for in other systems. Features like automatic data compression and table partitioning. Those things require an enterprise license with SQL Server. That can cost tens of thousands of dollars. With Postgres, you get this by default, for free. Price and features aside, you still might be thinking, so what? I like my current database system, it works well for me, and it could take too long to move anyway. It's true that moving backend systems is difficult, but as you're about to see, we moved the entire Stack Overflow database, millions and millions of records, into Postgres using an automated tool that took just over 10 minutes to run. Rob went on to tune the database so completely that it actually ran faster than SQL Server in some cases. And you can still work with your favorite tooling. There are many drivers that allow you to work with Postgres on Windows, and PG-SQL, which you can download and install from NuGet right now, and DevArt's free Postgres driver. The latter allows you to hook Visual Studio right up to your Postgres database and work with it like you've been working with SQL Server. When you install Postgres, you also have the option to install quite a few additional tools, such as pgadmin 3. It's a very functional GUI manager for Postgres, and it helps you become familiar with SQL concepts unique to Postgres. My favorite is Navicat, which you see here. I have the Mac version. The Windows version comes with even more features, like a report writer and a maintenance scheduler. Since Postgres is open source, there are a number of tools built to work on top of it. We're going to show you pgadmin 3 and Navicat in this production, but I encourage you to check out others online. Postgres guards your data, adheres strictly to standards, comes with a number of enterprise features out of the box, and it's fast. But the real power of Postgres comes from the intelligent way that it's been put together. One key feature that makes DBAs jump for joy is Postgres' multi-version concurrency control, or MVCC. Now, as developers, we understand that writing data to a table means a temporary table lock to avoid concurrency issues. We can get around this in SQL Server by using the no-lock keyword, which drives DBAs utterly insane. Postgres does things differently. It makes it all virtual with the MVCC. You can insert, update, and delete, and even select to see your changes, all against a snapshot version of the data that you want to change, held in memory. And only when you're ready to commit does it flush your changes transactionally. We'll show you this in action in a future episode. Another intelligent feature of Postgres, the built-in data types are numerous, but they're also relative to the work you do. All string values in Postgres are UTF-8 by default. This means no more messing with varchar or nvarchar. It's all just varchar. In addition to numeric and date values, you can also specify timestamps with UTC-compliant time zones, and Postgres will handle the offset for you. IP, network addresses, MAC addresses, IPv6, all of these are built-in data types, including arrays, which you'll see in a future episode. So you can write functions in Postgres in regular SQL, just like you can in MySQL or SQL Server, or you can use a structured programming language that's built in called PLPG SQL, which we're going to show you. Now, if you don't like that, you can install a plugin that allows you to write functions in your favorite language, like Ruby, Python, or JavaScript. Full text indexing is built in and ready to go out of the box with many configuration options, and you can store the indexing information in a column right in your table, and then you can put an index on that column for an additional speed boost. You can even index functions in Postgres, something no other database system can do. There are dynamic joins, windowing functions to make rollups simpler, and completely off-the-charts capabilities such as table-based inheritance, which allows you to build out a bit of an object-oriented database table model, which is strange and oddly compelling. Postgres is powerful, capable, fast, and most importantly, intelligent. It's a system that we think you're going to fall in love with. It works on Linux and Microsoft Windows with a price tag that is quite compelling, in other words, free. I've been talking long enough. Let's jump in and have a look at Postgres. Hello again, Mr. Sullivan. How are you today?
Not too bad. Yourself?
I'm
We
doing-
don't have any tornadoes in the forecast
It's
yet.
better than what we did last time. Well, let's get to it. So what we're looking at here is what we did for the full throttle database tuning episode, where you took 4 million records from Stack Overflow, right? From their data dump, and you jammed it in SQL Server, and then we used ASP.NET MVC, and we showed how to tune it so it didn't crash. For this production, I thought it'd be kind of fun to do a little shtick where, Jeff calls us and says, hey, my licensing is going through the roof. You guys got to do something about it. And so we decided to take it full tilt and go mono and Postgres. That was the joke, at least. You kind of went off the deep end. Tell me what we're looking at here.
Oh, Rob, I'm not the first person to misinterpret your joking as you being serious.
That's a problem I have, yes.
So this looks like the exact same site, right? Pretty much where we left off last time.
Mm-hmm.
But it only looks like that on the surface.
Okay.
What we have going on behind the scenes is that our ASP.NET MVC codebase was modified just slightly and now runs completely on Linux. And not only does the codebase run on Linux, our whole backend has completely migrated from SQL Server to Postgres.
Wow. So it was kind of funny. I was thinking, is this too tall an order for us? But yeah, look at that. It's running. Where's the bottom line? Linode. You have it running up at Linode.
Yep.
Wow.
I thought it was going to be daunting at first, and because I'm not a Linux guy.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, this is probably going to be much harder than I think, and was completely shocked at the ease that all of it went together.
Right. So I want to cut right through all the fluff here, because people watching this who are happy with SQL Server would say, big deal. Why do I care? It's fun as a mental exercise. Whoop-de-doo. I'm just going to throw it out right now from what you and I have been talking about. Postgres is more than capable of standing up against SQL Server, as you're about to show me. And I'm not trying to say anything negative about SQL. If you like SQL, then go to it. But what I think is important is that we take a look around and see what else is out there. You, as a SQL Server DBA, were more than surprised at what you saw with Postgres, correct?
Yes, and again, this is taking nothing away from SQL Server. I mean, it is a best-in-class relational engine. And I was really worried going over to Postgres that it's open source. It's probably going to feel hacky. Uh, I probably didn't think it'd be up to snuff. One of the really cool things or powerful things in SQL Server is this concept of parallelism and parallel queries.
Mm-hmm.
And Postgres doesn't have that. So I thought, well, there's probably no way it's going to be able to scale.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's only part of the picture. And the other thing is, I thought the optimizer in SQL Server is one of Microsoft's pride and joys. It has so much research into it. It is magically complex. And I was thinking, there's no way an open source optimizer can match that, right? Oracle and Microsoft, they throw so much money into it, and that all was completely shattered.
Really? And so this is opinion of a DBA again. I mean, I find that fascinating. You're not just some arm-waving developer going, "Oh, Postgres is awesome." You're a DBA.
No, and the fun thing is that every aspect of Postgres, from the development side to the administrative side, was like I was just opening up Christmas presents, exploring it.
Interesting. Okay, so let's just I want to get right to it. A lot of people out there will find it absolutely unbelievable that Postgres could stand up against SQL Server, but as you're about to show, we got both sites side by side here. So
yes.
And we got the profiler on the left side there that shows what? What are we looking at?
It's just showing execution times and run times. This is Sam Saffron's mini profiler.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's going to break it down. Now, up front, these are not the exact same code bases.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, this window is the Postgres one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been modified to handle some of the different aspects of mono and stuff, but it is calling, a Postgres backend. And time-wise, I mean, it's being just as fast as this one calling a SQL server. They're both calling localhost. So this is a local Postgres server running on Windows and a local SQL server obviously running on Windows.
So Postgres has paid a lot of attention to being able to scale, and it has some really interesting features. One you were telling me about is compression. What is that?
So compression is one of those things that DBAs absolutely love. Because when you get to compress your data down, that means you can store more on your disks. But disks are only part of the story, because what's on your disk ends up going into memory. This is like why DBAs freak out over data types and all that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people say, disk space is cheap, so who cares? But you should care if you're talking about a database. It's just, right?
Right. Well, yeah, because, I mean, disk space is cheap if you're just backing up a bunch of garbage that no one cares about. But if you're on a database where every little drop of I/O matters, fast disks aren't cheap. And more importantly than disks, what goes in your RAM? Because what comes off your disk goes into your RAM, into your data cache in your RAM. Well, if you have, if you've poorly chosen data types and get a bunch of black hole storage space, which you can do in any relational engine, you're wasting your RAM cache, which means you have to do more calls to get your data. And that's one of the reasons that people spend so much money on the enterprise license for SQL Server is to get data compression.
Oh, really? Yes.
So in playing with Postgres has this concept of toast. They call it toast. And, the layman's term for their toast thing is, compression by default. It looks at your table and, certain data types, when they reach a certain size, it says, okay, we can compress this. This is a great candidate for compression. So when I'm looking at how much data I have to manage, this is SQL Server on the left. Same database, 23 gigs uncompressed.
Whoa.
Just the normal, just by default, Postgres out of the box, we're compressed down to just under 7.
So translated, this means that if you wanted to prime the database, which Stack Overflow does every morning, or whenever they power up the database, they select star from posts, and that loads all of that into memory. So if I'm just being completely ridiculous about it, possibly it would load 24 gigs of data into memory using SQL Server, as opposed to, you're telling me just under 7 gigs for Postgres? Wow.
Yeah. Now,
that makes a difference.
TechPub, you're hosted at AWS, right?
Yes.
How cheap is your RAM there?
I have no idea, but yeah, it costs some money.
but you're a startup, so just saying I just need 8 gigs of RAM versus I need 32
Mm-hmm.
gigs. That's money that affects you every month, and
That's
the
true.
licensing costs to get to Enterprise Edition on SQL Server will it'll leave your knees shaking, and that sticks us a lot of times into that fear. SQL Server DBAs, we have that fear of gosh, we can't really scale out
Right.
because the licensing cost is going to murder us.
Okay. So what we know right now is using Postgres uh, won't hurt us in terms of growing our business. In fact, it might even, if you're really paying attention to cost, it might be good. But if we're just focusing on the technical things, it'll grow with us just fine. It is an enterprise-ready database. Let's take a look at the tools. Now, a lot of people out there are going to say, okay, fine. It sounds like I can use this, but what does it mean for me as a developer if I'm trying to use it on a daily basis?
So I read sometimes blog posts saying that you don't want to use Postgres because there's no GUI. And people from a .NET background, we love our GUIs,
Oh, yeah,
right?
gotta have it.
Management Studio, and this is what I sit in all day long. There we go, Management Studio. This is my fun little tool where every 3 years, when a new SQL Server is released, everything's moved around, right?
Yeah, that is one of the interesting things about Management Studio.
And it starts me with database diagrams, which no one uses, and they move activity monitor around everywhere. Every 3 years, there's the cost of SQL Server is one thing, but there's also the cost of the learning and the cost of the lag of their release cycle, and how much stress has gone into licensing.
Okay.
For Postgres, we don't get that, and we still get a GUI to manage our stuff.
And so this is pgadmin 3, which is free and comes with Postgres, right? Or it's an optional download, I believe.
Yes.
All right. So it looks
on Windows, it comes bundled in.
Oh, okay.
But you can get it standalone. Like I'm running 1.14.1,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just nice. It's a little more Spartan than say Management Studio. A lot of companies have made a lot of money with Management Studio and trying to add plugins to make it usable for us. Redgate's made a lot of money.
Yeah, that's true.
And pgadmin doesn't have that same type of.
Well, take me through I see the database there, and I see Stack Overflow. I mean, this looks like a typical drop-down that you might see. I see catalogs, extension. I don't see anything that says tables. This is a look. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, there's going to be a little adjustment to terminology, but you're going to get that with everything in technology, right?
Yeah,
everyone always wants to change terminology.
Yeah.
What you care about are this thing called schemas, which is going to hold our public schema.
Mm-hmm.
And when you drill down that far, that's where you start getting things that are more familiar, like tables and functions.
Okay.
And what I like about it is that people start to get really afraid of SQL. I don't want to learn SQL. I get scared of it. But I like this tool, how it keeps it present.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I'm not just clicking on buy badges. So I can even just start passively learning SQL just by clicking with my objects.
Okay. Well, it looks, to be honest with you, it looks like a tool written by an engineer. And it's not necessarily bad, but for people who are trying to get into something and check it out, it's not exactly welcoming, as you've been mentioning. But there's another tool. It's one that I use all the time for TechPub. It's Navicat. I had to pay for it, but I was more than happy to. Actually, I think for the edition that I had, I think it was $120 because I just got the version for Postgres, but you can get it for SQL Server, MySQL. I think you can even get it for Oracle. This is much nicer. And you know what the thing I really like about this tool for Windows is that report builder. That thing is pretty handy, but we'll talk about that. We can talk about that later on. But yeah, you can build reports as part of your tool and run them right here, which is great. Export them in all different kinds of formats, and I think that's pretty darn handy.
Yeah, I ended up buying this tool also just because I really loved it for development.
Yeah.
pgadmin, I think, really lives up to its name. It is great for Postgres administration, which I have to do plenty of. But when it comes to developing, I really, really enjoyed developing in Navicat.
Mm-hmm. And they have a free version as well. I should throw that out there.
Yes.
They definitely have a free version as well. It lets you do all the things you typically do, tables, views, functions, lets you plant a query. There's other things that it layers on if you buy it, which is the report feature, the backup, scheduled backups, and then modeling, which it's kind of funny because that's the thing you just poo-pooed with SQL Server. But this one's not so bad. I kind of like it. Ah, come on. This is not so bad, isn't it?
No, I think if you're a developer, and I see developers playing with these tools all the time, this one's not bad. Not bad at all.
Okay.
And there's nothing, just because I'm going to be snotty about a modeling GUI doesn't mean that there isn't value. That's just my opinion, and I'm a DBA, and I have to give you a certain level of crap. Otherwise, that's in my job title, right?
Yeah, that's fine. There you go. So let's just tootle around with some data. I just want to, people like to open up tables and make sure their database is there. And so maybe we can show the data grid.
Oop.
Yeah, so all the things that you would imagine. You got filter wizards. Form view is kind of cool.
Yep, Firehose mode, which I know developers love.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's import and export with these options. Just all the stuff you get out of the box. That's very handy.
So you used, which tool did you use to import the data from Stack Overflow?
That is a great question, because I tried a lot of methods. First, I started with, just a CSV export, which was a complete disaster. I mostly did it for kicks. You get a couple beers and you say, "Yeah, let's try a CSV export of the Stack Overflow database." And that died. I also tried replicating, because I thought that'd be a fun endeavor to replicate, but Microsoft replication isn't really friendly unless you're Oracle.
Okay.
And then, let's see, I tried just doing a little console app, with Massive. Thought that'd be, console apps are a fun little exercise. And that worked okay, but it wasn't the speed, it wasn't the performance I was looking for, and it still felt kind of hacky. What I ended up going with was the built-in import and export with Navicat.
Okay. It's kind of funny because, I don't know, I always talk about this, but I worked at a data mining startup, and we did all kinds of ETL, moving data around. Boy, what a pain. And those tools, the imports and export, if the word wizard was there, 99% of the time, forget it. And I ended up writing so many console apps to move data around. It's just because every time you have to customize it. But it sounds like this is quite capable. And I've never used it. You've mentioned it to me before.
I actually did this one not really thinking it was going to be that great, because, again, I played the wizard game too and thought, I'm just throwing things at this to play around. Let's see, and was blown away. ODBC, import from. It's going to give you a little prompt. And we'll say...
Yeah, look at that. OLADB. Okay. Or native client. Very nice.
Okay. For SQL Server 2008. Oops, when I click it right. And we're going to localhost.
There we go. Stack Overflow.
Okay, gives us our tables there. Yeah. So if we're going to bring over comments, we just select it. Next, target table. Here's one of the gotchas. Postgres cares a lot more about casing than SQL Server does. And just to make our lives easier, we're going to lowercase it. We're going to say it's a new table.
And you're naming it import because you already have a comments table in this database.
Yeah, I don't want to save over our data.
And look at that. Okay.
What I like here that you don't necessarily get in all tools is the ability to say on the import to set this as a primary key. If you've used the Management Studio import export wizard, it'll make tables all day long, but it won't give them primary keys or things like that, which are a pretty big deal, especially in SQL Server.
Now, will it set it up as an auto-incrementing key, or will it just say, this is a primary key? It will. Wow.
I believe it will.
Okay. So what's the condition query down there?
This just says, okay, say we only wanted...
okay.
We had a bunch of test data
under
100. So, we could throw in a condition like that.
Okay.
Again, data types, these probably look pretty familiar to you. There's not a huge variance except for something like timestamp. Timestamp in SQL Server is a very odd...
It's a binary stamp, if I remember right.
It's written. It doesn't really necessarily have much to do with times or stamps, whereas in Postgres, timestamp is, you can take it as a very literal translation. This is, like a date time in SQL Server.
Well, we're going to dive into data types and all that good stuff in, I think, the next episode, yeah?
the other thing is we probably won't get an error, but you select this continue on error, you're also going to get a very nice log with this tool of what errored, which is incredibly handy.
Okay.
And off it goes.
Look at that, and it's jamming. So how many comments do we have? Probably a whole bunch.
I don't know, but so this is a pretty significant migration. And how much SQL did we have to write to do this?
That's well, for a DBA, that's a bad thing, isn't it?
Well, I'm a DBA and I like this tool, so it's tooling and GUIs and wizards, it's all really subjective.
Yeah.
Like anything, a GUI by itself, but a GUI done right, or an import tool done right, or a wizard done right, that's, everyone can agree that that's a good thing.
Well, let's talk to Postgres, shall we? And I can do that. I can say add new item. Going to go through the same sort of thing once again, ADO, except this time I couldn't get Northwind inside of Postgres. I think it's got some sort of warning, look out for Northwind. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the world database that I have in Postgres and new connection, except this time I'm going to change this to Postgres SQL Server. That's funny. Then I'm going to say localhost. I hit OK. And then, great, world entities, what we'll call it, just fine. But notice this. This is great. This is saying, hey, you know what? We've noticed that the password is embedded in here. Is that okay? And I'm going to say, yes, go ahead. Include the sensitive data. Notice that it wouldn't let me go forward. Just kind of a nice little bit of security in there. I like that. So I'll hit next. It's going to do the same thing, retrieving database information. Great. And the tables in here, pretty easy. City, country language. I'll just say include them all. Finish. All right, same thing, class diagram shows you what you got. Kind of interesting here. So I'm going to go back to program, and instead of this, I'm going to say world entities. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose countries in here, and inside of here, I will choose item dot, I think it's just name. Yep. All right, so now we hit run. Haven't really had to do much. I'm bouncing around all different kinds of data sources here, but I'm working with it all in a typed way. Look at that. It works just dandy. Well, this looks like it's humming. I think we've had a pretty good look at the basics. I think what I've tried to do with this episode is to give people a reason just to think about Postgres, basically by saying, look, it will move as quick as SQL Server. It is enterprise grade. The tooling out there is really nice and compelling. Moving data into it is also really compelling. But of course, there's more issues that people have in their mind. Number one, why should I choose Postgres over something like MySQL? I'm going to answer that in the next episode. The next question they might have is, well, okay, fine. How do I use this in ASP.NET or something like that if I'm a .NET person? And then finally, we are going to take a deep look at some of the really cool things that is in Postgres altogether. That's all coming up in the coming episodes. Thanks for this, Rob.
Oh, enjoyed it.